everybody. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Strangers Worth Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, reporting live from Tucson, Arizona, my quarantine home. And as usual, I'm set up in the mobile truck recording studio today because that's kind of what I've got at my disposal. We were trying out some new internet options today, and they totally didn't work out. We were hoping to get a better signal from where we're parked, and nothing doing. So I'm back in the truck, and that's fine. So today I'm excited for this episode because I have got Chris Schroeder from Boulder, Colorado. He's a triathlete and he does a bunch of stuff that I don't know anything about, and looking forward to kind of talking with him, especially forward to the fact that the podcast now can kind of be remote and be wherever it is. Although I do miss getting to meet people in person, but we're gonna make the best of it. So, Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on here. It's always awesome to just record and kind of meet with new people.
Yeah, are you kind of a big podcast fan? I should tell the people there's nothing to hide here. I'm excited because you are one of the first people that reached out to me to be able to come on the show, and I said absolutely. The stuff you do looks fascinating. So, is this like something that you enjoy doing? Really, is getting on podcasts?
I enjoy it, especially right now is kind of a crucial time, you could almost say, to be on podcasts. For a lot of the professional athletes, our biggest value or benefit we give to our sponsors is the racing. So now that we don't have that, it's kind of like now is the most important time for you to show your value by doing things like podcasts and just whatever you can do to kind of still be valuable to them in the marketing sense.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, like, while the events are quieted down from this crisis, it's time to kind of step up and be able to give people some more of you and maybe even a different side now.
Exactly, and this is just a way that I found that I enjoy, putting myself out there in a marketing sense. I have tried I do quite a few things now, and it's kind of an interesting little path that I'm on of just all these different medias and how I can be better at them and improving and learning new skills.
Yeah, and I saw that you had like a YouTube vlog that you've just gotten started up recently as well, and and you mentioned that you stream sometimes on Twitch. So where does that come from for you? I make a lot of content just out of especially the podcast, just because I really like talking to people. But then a lot of my job is in digital marketing and creating content. So where does that kind of come from you that want to be creating content and be
I've
working on those
always
types of
had
projects.
it comes from a couple of angles at it because there's the angle you could say Twitch is kind of a community angle. The roots I kind of have are a little nerdy. I enjoy my video games. I enjoy my fantasy. I enjoy that stuff. And Twitch is kind of a community for gamers and people that also enjoy it. So it was kind of a happy medium when I started doing that because it is a media that my sponsors will do value, and it's an option for me to connect with people that are completely outside of sport in most sense. And then YouTube was for me it was a real challenge. It's I had no experience with anything in it. No filming, no editing, storytelling, all that stuff was very new to me. So starting that was really fun and it still is. And I feel like it's kind of grown from a daily vlog style to more just kind of actually making video projects in a way. I'm trying to lean more on the artsy side of trying to get interesting shots. I'm lucky enough
Right.
where my significant other um is does have a background in art, so she really helps me with the recording and the editing and the storytelling of them. But it's
Yeah,
a
and
really fun project.
I noticed that it was sort of like because I'd seen some things that were like, and I know like with blogging, some people do it sort of more as like as a journal or even just like showing what they're doing with their day. But then I had seen another project where you were like, this is sort of the task that I'm taking on right now, and I think the one I watched was you going up Flagstaff in Boulder, which for anybody who hasn't been to Boulder, I used to live in Denver for several years, and I know that road quite well, and it's a beast. I mean, it is just straight uphill type challenge. I guess I want to know like what is it that makes you want to look at that hill and say like I want to do that. You know what I mean? Because I look at it and I think it'd be nice to come down that hill.
It's a fun hill to come down, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about picking that one was that it's I would say it's borderline unhuman to have the fastest time up the hill. You know, the guy who currently has it, for context, for a lot of people, Levi Leipheimer is a former pro cyclist, and he set the fastest time up Flagstaff in 2012. And the time that he went up that was at the end of the last stage in a multi-stage bike race, and it's uphill, and he raced it to win the overall of the stage race, and he did successfully do that. To add further context, Levi Leipheimer is a convicted doper and was on drugs at the time of the effort. So it's an effort that can't be beaten, is kind of my perspective of this is, this time is unhuman. And then, here's everyone below that.
Right. So he's like at the end of a race already. He's already gassed, and then he still somehow sets this record time, and we're supposed to look at
Exactly.
that and be like, yeah, that's realistic, right?
Yeah,
Like that's not.
exactly. So
Yeah.
it's something that it's just interesting because you kind of also because it's such a popular climb. I believe there's 100,000 attempts or something on it if you look on the Strava. So going out there and doing that kind of gives you a good idea of where you place. And I also will kind of give me an idea if I go out and do it again to just kind of help me see where I am. And it's just fun. I really enjoyed that. Not only the effort, but I enjoyed that video project. It was kind of a interesting story for me to tell. And it was interesting because it was a failure, but it was supposed to be a failure. At no point did I go and think that I could come anywhere near him. So it was really just kind of like this is where I am. This is where someone who's not human was, and just this is everyone in between.
Right. I feel like, well, this is so great. This is my favorite type of episode start because I've already found like 7 rabbit holes that I would love to go down with you. So that's great. Um, but you mentioned that this dude who set the record was doping, and I know that's a huge thing in the sport of cycling. And I forget what is that. You've got to know this. That documentary that the dude created where he tested
Oh, the
himself
Boulder
doping.
freaking guy. Of course, the guy
Was
happened to
it?
live in Boulder, and like half of that documentary for people that have ever seen Invictus,
Yeah, this
everywhere
is the
he's right.
one where he runs into
Yeah,
the Russian scientist who's like
yeah,
literally running from the KGB.
yeah.
Like
So
the
that
dude,
documentary for people that have seen that, a lot of the B-roll footage, which is just kind of the cool footage of him riding his bike, is on Flagstaff. What we're talking about
yeah.
right now, and he lives in Boulder. He was known for coming on a lot of the group rides. Was the guy who did it? That was a when it came out, it was definitely it was interesting because it basically just reminded people of stuff they already knew. I mean,
Right.
everyone knew. It can almost put a visualization to it. A lot of people in this world, especially the amateur world, especially the masters group that aren't even professionals, it's very easy to dope. And this kind of put a visualization of look, go to a skincare doctor, say this, say that, you're gonna get this, then do this.
Oh, so that it's really easy to access this supply. But then,
Yeah,
what about systems for testing, though? I mean, as far like for the amateur who's not in the sports world, we assume that there's like a fairly rock solid way of testing athletes before they go and perform their sport. But at the same time, obviously, that documentary sort of blew that out of the water and really showed the conspiracy there.
yeah, and the documentary did a great job of showing that that it's always a battle. The testers are trying to do the best job they can, but we know what the tests are. So then the athletes and their support team and their scientists and their doctors have a very easy time of beating them. If they
Right.
understand timing, they understand your body. I mean, I'm by no way an expert. Let's make that extremely clear.
Oh
I
no,
don't.
we're on a philosophical level here. It's
Yeah,
all
on
good.
some philosophical level, think of it as anyway. Think of it as when you're a kid and you're smoking pot, and you don't live in Colorado, and you're not whatever our limit is, 21. You're smoking pot, but your parents are onto you, or your school's onto you, and they're going to test you. You know what to do to beat the test that they're going to give you for
Right.
marijuana.
Right.
You know, Majority of 15-year-old kids in this country that smoke pot are just inept at beating drug tests as pro athletes.
Sure. Which fortunately isn't a problem in Colorado.
Nope.
which is much nicer, much less persecution.
much less persecution. I came from New York City.
Well, that's good. So I was going to ask, kind of, how did you end up in Boulder? Because it's a really, really cool place. I mean, when I lived in Denver, so I lived on sort of in the northeast suburbs off of Denver, and but I was still pretty close to the city, but it was just as easy to get to Boulder as it was to Denver. We went out there all the time. I mean, some of the best motorcycle riding for me was sort of what did it out there. Like, you take a motorcycle. I'm not actually sure if I ever took a motorcycle up Flagstaff. I may have once. Yeah, I think maybe I did once, but then there's sort of like peak to peak highway all back behind that area to the west. Like, it's a pretty incredible place. So I can understand why you'd want to go out there, especially as a cyclist. But it was that the primary reason that you moved out there?
No, college was the primary reason I moved out here. Well, there was a lot of things I would say. It was college was the reason that allowed me to move to Boulder because I graduated from the University of Colorado, and then while I was searching for schools, I was doing triathlon at the time was kind of my everything, and I knew that Boulder was a mecca, and I knew there's a training ground here. And confusingly, also at the time, the University of Colorado has a triathlon club, which is a college club sport, which had this is where it got confusing was that through no merit of the club's own had won a bunch of national titles. But the interesting thing about that is that you would have a bunch of other athletes similar to cases of me that would see Boulder as the triathlon mecca and then come here for college, and then while in college participate in this club. So they're training and taking part of the coaching and the programs outside of the college, and then doing the college races under the college's banner. So when I was looking, it looked like, oh my gosh, this is a program that brings people to this level. But the reality is, Boulder and all this stuff outside of that program is what made these athletes so good. So it was kind of a weird awakening when I showed up to like the first day of the club meeting and realized that 90% of the people here had never even done a triathlon before and just want people to work out and drink beer with. While I'm sitting there like trying to take it super seriously. So that kind of made it an awkward uh, interaction between the club and
That's
I. But
that seems really confusing that it's like on a club level. That doesn't make sense to me. There's not a collegiate sport even in Boulder for triathlon.
at the time, it wasn't collegiate. It was just simple. It was literally a club, the same way you can have a Quidditch club or chess club.
Interesting.
Um, since then, women's triathlon has become a collegiate sport to help colleges offset having the same number of women athletes as men athletes, but it's only women.
Oh, got it. Okay. Strange. So then from there, so you're top in this club and you're taking this seriously. It's not a social thing for you so much. So then how did you kind of navigate your way then into the pro circles?
Well, the pro circles in Boulder is it wasn't too hard to get into. I would say it's like it wasn't hard to get into, but at the same time it was really hard to get into. I mean, the reality is that in Boulder, all you have to do is join the local gym and go to the open swim practice, and it's stuffed full of pros. So getting around them wasn't overly hard at the time. When I first moved to Boulder, I was coached by a very renowned triathlon coach, Julie Dibbins, and she was coaching a lot of pros at the time. So then me, as this kind of hotshot 18-year-old, came into that, which wasn't really super healthy for me because when you're 18, it just, I mean, not that as a 25-year-old now looking back and go, 18-year-old shouldn't be training with a extreme veteran of the sport. It just doesn't work out well. But
It's just too intense. Like, was it
you just don't
it
know what
breaks you
you're
down too
doing when you're
much?
18. Is
Oh
the
yeah.
reality.
Yeah.
You just make these mistakes that, and it's just not the environment for someone who's 18. I think,
Sure.
but that's was just kind of like, and that was just kind of how I slowly got introduced to it, and then you can just progress from that to making friends, and then you get in your clique, and then you get rejected from your clique and find another clique, and then so on until you. Well, I guess it just kind of goes on like that forever.
Yeah, just bounce around
Yeah.
looking for the right place. I get that, man. But I recently did a podcast episode, obviously with Laura Gruden out here in Tucson, who's a pro triathlete, and she was sort of my first connection to understanding some things about this. So I have a little better picture of kind of how this works in the pro triathlete world, which I was totally brand new to. And her kind of quarantine experience right now, to kind of take it more to current events here, is she was already at the time working on a training program. She wasn't set to compete for several months anyways. So it hasn't majorly affected her. She can still go out, she can still run a bike, but the issue for her is that the pools, she can't get in them right now. So it's really hard for her to train the swimming. What's your situation out there, kind of in Boulder? I imagine you guys are still in pretty heavy lockdown right now. I know Colorado was having a pretty hard time with that. So how's it going out there?
So honestly, yeah, the pools being closed does suck, but that's I'm not really get down and sad about things. I'm more just kind of a move on. And Laura is kind of unique. She does not race very much, and I'm kind of on the other end of that. I don't think I would ever say no to a race. I mean, in the summer, the amount of times that I'll sign up for the local race, like the night before it starts, happens way more often than my coach would like. I've actually already raced 4 times this year, and this all kind of happened actually on the back end of me coming back from doing my first Ironman in Ironman New Zealand. So I was already kind of, I've done a couple races this year, so I luckily had some results in the bag and some stuff to talk about, and then some, and to tell the sponsors about, and just that was all good. And then with the pools being canceled was kind of, I'm taking it in stride as kind of almost a blessing in disguise because earlier this year I was introduced to gravel cycling, which is for people that don't watch a lot. There's these races that a lot of them happen in kind of the Midwest, in Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas and the Dakotas, where it's a race on gravel roads on a bike, and it's a really big community thing. And I got introduced to one in Oklahoma earlier this year, and it really kind of blew my mind and made me slightly question the path my career was going in because of just this community I found. But I already had all these roots and I already had all this stuff holding me to triathlon. And then this happened. And now all of a sudden I can't swim.
Yeah.
So my coach and I said, look, we can't swim. That there's nothing we can do. That's just I'm not about to go break into a gym and swim because I'll go to
Yeah.
jail. So
Yeah.
we're like, all right, well, why don't we make the most of this? I really enjoyed gravel. I really want to do some more of those races. And now all of a sudden we have the gift of being able to train almost solely as a cyclist. I still run, but now I'm able to train that much harder on the bike from not having to swim. And because I'm not able to swim, as soon as races open back up, the first race I'm going to do can't be a triathlon because I would have not swam for the last however long.
Right,
So it will have to
exactly.
be a gravel race. So we're kind of taking this small blessing of let's see what it's like. Let's see if this lifestyle, let's feel it out. Do I like only training on the bike? Do I like only doing gravel races? Let's take this kind of blessing, train it out, do a race, see what happens, go from there. I will do more triathlons this year, but that's kind of the short-term plan.
Is it is it a totally different bike that you're on? I have to imagine the wheels for sure can't be as thin, right?
Yeah,
When you're
imagine
doing
mountain bike
gravel.
wheels on a road bike.
Okay.
So
So
that's kind
you
of
got a
the
lot
thing.
more drag too. It's a lot more
Yeah,
kind of laborious
I mean
then.
it's very different. It's
Yeah.
completely different. But the community is what blew me away. In a triathlon, everyone there is, oh, I'm gonna get a PR this and something something that and forget everyone else. Gravel, it's like everyone's there to literally just make friends first and do a ride and oh, someone happens to be timing me, but it doesn't matter except for maybe the top 10 guys who are trying to win. So I went there with like my significant other, and she had a catastrophic mechanical, but she's standing on the side of the road, and while she's standing there, probably like 20 people stopped and were like, "Oh my gosh, let me help you."
Right in the
Which
middle of a
that
race.
alone in a triathlon would never happen. Not to
Yeah.
mention, triathlon actually has rules preventing competitors from like assisting others. So
Right.
it was really just interesting for me. And then I was because of the result and the community was just so strong there. I was introduced to a bike brand, Lauf, which is Icelandic, which is the coolest thing ever. I honestly I don't even know if I've met someone from Iceland prior. And then I'm in the middle of Oklahoma chatting with two people from Iceland that flew over for the race.
To
And
Oklahoma, yeah, of all places.
yeah, so a couple weeks later, I signed my first proper bike sponsorship deal with a bike brand that's not even in the sport that I was a professional at the time,
Right.
which was just like a mind blowing experience. So it kind of like took me back for a second and made me really just be like, wow, like this is just the coolest thing ever. And the bike brand, honestly, the bike aside, the guys who work for this brand are just, they have that vibe of they just do not take life too seriously. Everything is fun first and then business is kind of second.
Yeah.
And it's just like if you even like in their emails, they'll just throw in random tidbits about life, like, oh, go
Right.
for your ride, Chris. Do this, but then why don't you come home and bake a cake for yourself? And they'll just throw in random stuff like that. And it's so nice not to be super serious when you're talking to someone in a business sense.
Well, it sounds like they represent more of what you like from that gravel experience, anyways. Like it's not about the ultra competitive; it's about something else. It's about community or something. How so those races then? So I'm picturing typical triathlon versus those races. You must go a farther distance when it's just cycling, right? Like how far
Yeah,
are you
the
typically going?
distance is pretty. I did it. The one I did in Oklahoma was 85 miles, which I thought was freaking long. And in the gravel world, that's like a baby distance. The gravel world is like
Really?
150 to 200 is kind of like the normal distance, and then you'll get
Ouch.
outliers that are 100, and then the baby distance of like 85s. There's no official distances. It's just literally they squiggle a line on the map over farm roads, and then whatever it is what
Right.
it is. Um,
What do you still ride in those big tight groups? I feel like that would be much
you
harder on
do
gravel.
ride in those big tight groups, and it is terrifying because potholes come
Yeah.
out of nowhere.
Right, and you slip in side to side kind of on the gravel, and not
Yeah,
to mention like if you get taken off balance for 1 second, that gravel will move, and you. I mean, now I'm thinking in terms of not just like okay, riding a bicycle as a kid on gravel roads, which I used to do plenty of growing up in Illinois, but now I'm thinking about what do I hate on a motorcycle, and it's if I see gravel, like I hate it because you might be going down.
yeah. On a
Uh,
gravel bike, it's not as bad as it's. You're in a groove,
yeah,
and it's not as bad as it's actually. And like I said, it's really only a handful of guys there taking the races too seriously. Everyone else there is literally just having a really fun ride with their thousand best friends,
sure,
and there happens to be on gravel roads. So you don't you. It's actually pretty rare. I think there's actually like very few people that will get eaten by a pothole or something like that. People are pretty respectful about it and conscious of okay, I should call this out, or people are just even more aware of this person swung to the left. There's probably a reason for that.
right. So tell me, okay, so as I'm learning about the world of triathlon, which has been fascinating for me, the one thing that stood out and that I remember from even being a kid, like my dad talking about, is Ironman. Obviously, this is a big race. I know nothing about it. What is it that sets that race apart from other things in this world?
Well, so I actually just did my first Ironman in New Zealand. Um,
Is that where they're always held, or is that
no, they're all over the world. There's I don't know. There's probably Ironman the brand. So Ironman the brand puts on probably 100 of that distance race, which is the longest distance, and then there's a couple other brands, and then the local races will put on that distance. But it's the distance that really draws people to it. Ironman is just a brand and a marketing ploy to get people to do their races, and it's hard to. So after doing one, it's definitely the crazy challenge that I think gets most people to want to do it because it's not. It's just something that's so crazy that it makes you want to do it. Versus,
what is the distance that's so crazy?
so it's a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and then a 26.2-mile run.
Jeez, so you end on a marathon
Yeah, you end on a
after you've
marathon.
done those things.
It takes anywhere from 8 hours to 17 hours is the cutoff. It's all self-supported. Um, so it's a journey, and
Yeah.
it's hard because like having done one now, it you definitely get a perspective of just all the different people that do it, and just the kind of idea that, we're all out here doing the same thing. Some people will go under 8 hours, and some people will need the full 17. And it kind of shows you like everyone's like equally awesome for doing this. Like everyone's doing the same thing. Like no one's having easier time with this. It sucks just as
Right.
much for everyone.
Right. It's a lot more. It sounds like, of course, there's still going to be that competitive level of it. Someone's gonna be there to win, but it reminds me more of like your average marathon event, where it's like mostly this is a big community thing and everybody's taking part in this kind of historic gathering type thing. Like I don't think that the majority of people who show up for the Boston Marathon are there to win the Boston Marathon. Like you're talking about a small group, and the
Yeah,
rest it's a real
you would
communal
think
feel.
that, but the reality, the problem that I found was just the reality is not that. The reality is that, especially Iron Man as a brand, they want to create a reason to give you an award. So what they have is the professional male, then the professional women, then they have basically everyone from 18 to I think it's like 85 or something like that in 5-year age brackets, which then get awards for 10 deep. So just off of that, you're having almost 1,000 people that are going to stand on a podium, and or not 1,000, but you'll have 200 people that stand on a podium throughout the race. And if you have 200 people standing on a podium, that means you have 500 that are hoping to stand on the podium out of a 2,000
Interesting.
person race. So, and that was kind of my problem with triathlon is that there's so many people just took it so seriously, you know. And I think that even with the Boston Marathon, I bet if you showed up and you really looked at who's there, it does a similar thing where they have the overall, but then they have all these age group reward awards. So you're gonna have all these people there, just taking it very seriously, and that's just kind of it doesn't breed a friendly environment. There's not a lot of people kind of just happy to do it because it's awesome. They're more just super intense, ready to do it because they want a reward. And then in Ironman,
I
also they
can
have the world championship, and the way
yeah.
to get that is you have to get a qualifying spot by doing well. So it just kind of feeds this very competitive, very intense atmosphere, and it's a lot to handle for a lot of time because it's so
Yeah.
intense. And it's just for me, I love triathlon, but it's very intense when you're in situations like that, especially for an Ironman because people will train for huge amounts of time for this race, and they don't want to, they want to take it as seriously as they can.
Yeah, I can see that, and I can see that coming from your perspective too, because when you show up, at Ironman as a pro triathlete, like you're gonna be within those circles, and everybody in those circles, they got something to prove. But at the same time, I definitely will say that like I've been to a number of marathons over the years. My dad has run too many marathons and races, and from that perspective of his was always about more the personal achievement, and so he wasn't worried about age groups. I'm sure he did well, but he wasn't worried about that, and the people around him weren't worried about that. And I always thought that was really cool. This collective spirit of that it was really more about um, like a personal experience. But I also can totally understand that there would be no way for you to show up to an event like that and not see sort of the other side of it. Like I think that's got to be some level of perception in there.
Yeah,
Whereas there's someone who's like it's their lifelong dream to run a triathlon. Like if you're saying that they're dividing up age groups. First of all, I think that's funny, and I wonder where that cutoff is because like how many 75 to 80-year-olds like are running that race? You know what I mean? Like, are there even
yeah. They'll
three?
generally have like
Like,
one person who's probably
exactly
85. That's like the oldest person
right,
to do the race.
right, and that's kind of an incredible achievement too. Like
Yeah,
they're doing something that
and
at
that should
at
be
80
celebrated for
plus,
them doing
right?
the achievement, not because they won their age group of one person. Just
Yeah,
celebrate them for being
exactly.
awesome alone. You don't
Yeah,
need to add this other thing. They're awesome. Full stop.
yeah. So did you have a background in any one of those three different sports, running, swimming, or biking, before you got into the triathlon world? Like, was there one that kind of you were into younger that pushed you into this world?
Ah, no, I wish. Downhill skiing was my background growing up. I
Oh,
did
really?
trying to think. So for people that don't watch the Winter Olympics, downhill skiing is they go down a bunch of moguls and they go off a jump, and then they go down more moguls and then off a jump and then down more moguls, and then they're scored and whatnot. So I did that
What are they
growing up.
scored by? Is it speed or is it style?
Uh, it's like style, speed, form. the trick you do off the jumps. So it's a so I did that when I was so I let's go way back. I lived in Telluride, Colorado from like first grade to I don't know, probably like a little bit over ninth grade before moving to New York City. And skiing is just what you do if you live in Telluride, Colorado.
Yeah.
It's not like a there's no other option, but that doesn't
I
really stop
love
it. You
watching
still
the
have to ski. Even if you don't want to
when
ski, you go ski.
when you watch the Winter Olympics. It's so great to me because you see all of the gold, or all of the USA competitors in all of those winter sports are like from Colorado. Like so
Yeah.
many are from Colorado. Totally
Yeah, and
disproportionate.
Gus Kimworthy,
It's
who's
so funny.
one of the U.S. All Stars in the park skiing, and he was a Telluride born and raised guy, and he's I mean, he's a guy, and he came from Telluride, and it does breed Telluride and Colorado as a whole definitely produces quite the athletes. I mean, we have the X Games here every year, so we have we have the terrain and we have the beautiful mountains to kind of allow that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. It makes me think like I'm thinking like Malcolm Gladwell Outliers style. Like if you start this as a kid, the the number of hours you've got over someone who doesn't start as a kid is just immense. And then you've also got kind of mixed in there that Colorado just, I mean, for so many reasons, is such a great place to be as an athlete. I mean, it's a place where you can be outside year round doing various sports. You've got sort of the altitude advantage, which I know for when you're on that level, like can make a difference. Um, it's a it does it's not all that surprising, I guess, in the end. Um, it's such a great place to live. Like it's such a cool place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's why I'm still in Colorado, currently living in Boulder. But I grew up in a family that moved around a lot. I never really got quite that sense of home. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of on the edge of like maybe it's time to go live in Europe for a little bit or something along those lines. I've been in Colorado for a while. I'm kind of getting that itch to go live somewhere else and try something new.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're talking to the right guy. I always have that itch now. Like it's hard to stay put even for this month here. As much as I love Tucson, but the fact that we're sort of forced to stay put
Yeah, exactly.
is hard.
I'm
But
normally traveling at bare minimum once a month to go do a race.
right,
Bare
right.
minimum, which kind of does help subside the urge to move. But now that I'm like stuck in my house or just riding my bike outside and then coming back to my house, I'm like, you know what? I could, you know, maybe we move to Italy.
Switch it up. Where do you? I'm sure you've competed all over the place, and probably in Europe too. So, is there a place in Europe that you're picturing?
So I absolutely love Florence. I've never raced there. I've actually never raced in Italy. I just I'm a my major's in sociology. Just to give you how much context, I absolutely love culture, and I love a rich history. And Italy has that by the handful.
Right.
And also, just their cycling culture there is huge and it's amazing, and the roads there are beautiful. That doesn't mean I would live anywhere that has those things. Like I absolutely love Paris to death. I would never live there
Why's that?
because it's a city,
It's
and
just too busy.
after you spend your glorious 5 days there exploring and seeing all the touristy things, you
Right.
realize how awful living in a city is.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. Those things run out. Like those things are great for just traveling and you're right, being a tourist, and then it just gets old. I mean, at least to me, and I think probably to a few other people, it's like now what? Like what is the day to day that makes this sort of worth being here?
exactly, and so that's just it's something that will happen at some point. But that's kind of the idea is that eventually my my significant other is on her way up to being a professional triathlete, potentially just potentially probably going the same way as me, doing triathlon professional and also having uh, a professional gravel side. And when that happens is when we'll probably have the freedom to then move somewhere like Italy to go and enjoy a different culture,
Yeah.
a different scenery.
Are you someone who picks up languages pretty easy, or have you attempted?
No, I have not. I say that I used to be. I think Spanish was really technically my first language. My my family lived in Argentina from when I was like 0 to 4 ish. So I learned Spanish, obviously, but then when I came back with my family, no one spoke Spanish to me, so I just learned English. And obviously, a 5-year-old isn't gonna think through the idea of maybe I should hold on to this
Right.
language. So now it's only English for me. But
Oh man, you had such a head start. You had to just keep it going.
yeah, so totally my parents'
Ah,
fault on that one. They just
yeah.
yeah.
Well, dude, you lived all over the place. What's the story there? Are you like an Air Force kid, or like
No,
what's
that's the
the?
thing. My parents have always I would always say my parents will always say yes to anything. So a lot of the times it's just job opportunities. We we do not have this sense of, oh, this is our home. Oh, this is our town. It's just, oh, do you want to move to Argentina? Yes. Do you want to move to Telluride? Yes. Do you want to move to Texas, Canada, New York City? It's just always a yes.
Yeah,
And that's kind of just how it's been my whole life, really. And now, they're finishing out they're about to retire in New York City, and then they'll definitely move again when that's over.
yeah. Well, is it? I think that there's kind of like ups and downs to having a childhood where you're either in one place or in
Oh yeah.
different places. And I wonder if that, like for me growing up, we lived in Central Illinois, and we did move once to a nearby town. It was probably like I guess I don't know, maybe like an hour away or so. So it was still kind of the same area, but totally different friend group. And that was like right as I was going into middle school. So like I think that that's kind of where people
Yeah.
I don't. Maybe for me, that I always thought of it as like that's where people form these kind of bonds with friends, to where I was always just a little bit on the outside of that group. I think, because I wasn't quite, I hadn't quite been around long enough. And then once you finish high school, you're moving on from there. So I've always felt like I had a little bit of the best of both worlds. Like I was able to kind of have those close friends who I was around for longer periods of time, but then I also wasn't all that attached. Um, so I always felt kind of good about that. But I wondered if that went back to how you were saying, like, you always look around for like a different click, right? But it never really like locks in. Do you think that that started at that time because you were
Yeah,
just
I've always been a
up and
loner
moving?
with that sense of like,
Yeah.
but for parallel, my sister did not handle the whole thing well. I think that when we really started moving, she was kind of at that wrong age to do it because I think she was more of established with her friends. So for her, it was more like you're just losing these friends, just say goodbye
Right.
forever. Well, less forever now with social media, but still, and she
It's
didn't
not the
handle it
same though, is
overly
it?
well.
Because you can't have those years back. Like it,
Yeah.
you can connect with people again, but it's like you have to form an entirely new friendship because obviously you're completely different people. Like I actually wonder how that's affecting kids now who do move around, but they do have social media, so like you can stay in contact with those friends on a more routine basis.
Yeah, it's interesting for a lot of reasons. It, but everyone does handle it differently. I definitely don't want to endorse it and say, "Oh, you should move around a lot with your kids." But
Right.
at the same time, it's a great thing to travel and see different places and see different cultures. I mean, there's literally like no bigger parallel than living in Telluride, freaking Colorado, of 2,000
Yeah.
people in an isolated town, to then living in New York City.
Right.
So
Right.
my experience very positive. I loved it. I can look back as an adult now and say that, but
Right.
that's not going to be everyone's experience.
Well, yeah, and I mean it kind of comes back to this thing that I think way too much about totally random things that aren't really like my business to think about. But for whatever reason, I think a lot about eh, raising kids. Like you want to raise your kids in like the best way possible, but also somehow you're almost like creating a really boring person. Like the most interesting people have weird things in their childhood or difficult times or whatever. And so if you're doing everything that's perfect for your kid all the time, what's going to happen to that kid who's never had like a hardship? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But like you can't give them hardship. But I feel like moving is one of those things. It's almost neutral. It's almost like you know this is a version of hardship, but it's not really going to be your life. You're still going to be taken care of, but you're going to have to adapt to something. So maybe that's kind of a good
yeah, it's definitely
switch around.
interesting. It's a definitely interesting thing to pond over. I've Yeah, it's interesting to pond over and think about.
I wish I could stop because it's not, yeah, I don't have kids. I don't need to be thinking about that kind of thing. But I can't, can't overlook it. It's just odd to me. But okay, I've gotten so far afield um, of anything, which is probably good in the end. That's what I say the podcast is all about. Um, so the one of the questions I had for Lara, and I'll ask you too, then, since you mentioned like there wasn't necessarily one sport for you, do you think that there's kind of one sport now that you do prefer? Like getting into the gravel cycling. Do you think cycling is kind of like the thing that you're always game to go do, or it
Oh,
draws you in
100%.
maybe more than the other two? Yeah,
100% for sure. Also, because I feel like if I had to really say why I love cycling, is because you can go places on your bike. I mean, if I swim, I'm literally just going back and forth in the water. If I run,
yeah,
even my longest runs are confined to 14, 15 miles, but I can go bike 100 miles and go places. Like I'm literally going and doing peak to peak highway and doing Flagstaff and seeing all this beautiful nature and really getting away from Boulder and away from just people.
yeah. You ride peak to peak. You go up there and do that stretch. Like
Oh
like
yeah, that's
where-ish
a
do you go?
phenomenal stretch. It's so pretty up there. It's
Do you
not.
go from? I'm trying to think of. It's like Ward.
Yeah,
No,
you climb
Ward's
up
not even how
Left-Hand
far it
Canyon to
goes.
Ward, and then you get on Peak Peak,
Yeah,
and you can go down to Lions or you can go up to Estes. You have to just be careful though, because it's Colorado, so it could be sunny and 70 degrees in Boulder, and it could be snowing up there. So you just always have to be
right.
careful when you go up there.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same thing when I used to get on the motorcycle of like, okay, it's gonna be so hot down here, I need to dress for that. But then I also know that as soon as I get like halfway up there, my hands are gonna start to go numb on me,
Yeah,
and you just like you get up there and have to switch gloves. Like it's a real interesting challenge. It's really interesting to just go up that steeply and that quickly to be in a totally different world. When we were looking for where we wanted to move in Denver, we came out because we lived in St. Louis before, so we had to take some time to come out to Colorado, tour some apartments, check it out, kind of see where we wanted to live, and we made the mistake of staying up in, I don't know if it's Nederland or Nederland. Everybody says it different, but we
yeah,
stayed regardless up at that's at like 9,000 feet, and then we would go during the day and see like apartments in Denver, which is more like 5,000, and just going back and forth like that, we were sick as dogs for like a week, just because every night you're going back up. Like you need to do the opposite. I think
yeah,
we should have stayed in Denver and taken the days to go up higher, because it'll mess with you if you're not used to it.
yeah. It's a and everyone acts differently from altitude. You can't really predict how someone's going to handle elevation, especially extreme elevation. So I mean, you just have people that just flat out can't go up there because their body just will freak out.
Does it start to feel different as you're riding up? Like you're breathing
Yeah,
hard.
and
Do
that's
you
why I
get to
kind
a
of
point where
like that
it's
ride. Is just that not only
yeah,
are you climbing, but the ride will get harder and harder as the further you go up because the oxygen gets less and less.
right?
And it's kind of a
And you
yeah, it's good. I mean, it's bad on your bad days, but it's good on your good days.
Yeah, I can't imagine having a day where I think that that's good, to be honest with you. But
Well,
like, but I understand. I appreciate you having that mindset about it. What do you do to keep yourself entertained on these long runs and long bikes? Do you listen to anything while you're going, or are you just in your
I
head?
generally go through books on tape. I can run through a book on tape really quickly, and I can focus on them while I'm still riding my bike and stuff. So that's generally what I that's just generally what I like to focus on.
I'm the same exact way. Andrea makes fun of me. People made fun of me because my heaviest workouts, I love a good book on tape, um, not like some loud music or anything like that. What do you listen to mostly?
I just recently did Michelle Obama's autobiography. That was my most
Oh,
recent
interesting.
book.
Okay. Do you like political? Like, well, you mentioned your sociology, so
I
like,
like biographies a lot, and I like
yeah,
autobiographies. So those are always fun. Yeah, those are always. I always found those interesting. I always find them either really, as long as they're not athletes. I will not read an athlete's biography ever again
why is that?
because I can like predict exactly how the entire book. Just the progression in this arc of the story is just the same every
Right.
time,
Yeah.
and it's just not interesting. Whereas if I read Michelangelo's biography, it's like an actual story, and there's conflict, and then there's not even slightly resolution, and there's more. It's just a lot of interesting stuff. Michelle Obama's one
When
of the
you
most
almost
brilliant,
want to
though.
you want to get out of your own world a little bit, right? Like it's like you don't necessarily want to be listening about like doing a hard athletic thing while you're doing a hard athletic thing. Like that kind of erases the purpose of it, right? I mean,
Yeah, and
makes you think about what you're doing.
yeah, it definitely really kind of teaches you just to be open to other people's lives, other people's cultures, and get you out of your own little bubble. Because I think a lot of people can kind of get sucked into what I'm doing every day is. I don't want to say it's not important, but when you're an athlete, but you definitely need to realize that there's a lot more going on in the world, and just kind of be attuned to that.
Right. Right. Like be a renaissance man.
Yes, I think we all need to be a little bit more like that in our lives and learn more about different cultures and different stuff.
So you obviously must spend a whole lot of your time dedicated to being a pro triathlete, but then you've mentioned that we've talked about how you make some content now, kind of, and you do some self promotion, which I think is great, and you're also doing the Twitch thing. Like, what else kind of do you end up doing with your time? Is that kind of the main focus, or do you have other things in that Renaissance man
What
kind of
else
view?
do I do with my time?
It's a hard question to answer, honestly.
So let's just say, like, I guess right now it is definitely like the simple rotation grind of wake up, work out, play games, focus on marketing, send emails. Um, if I find a if I find a good bit of spare time, I do enjoy writing to an extent. Which is an interesting kind of thing for me to do. I have dyslexia, so um, spelling and grammar is something I'm inherently horrible at. Um, but I really like just letting kind of words flow, which is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing because every time I write an email, I end up just dumping a ton of emotion into my emails, which isn't
Sure, it's
always brilliant when you're trying to
like
send something
purging.
serious, or
Yeah.
it just sets the wrong tone. But so I enjoy that. I've it's just been that's been an interesting process for me. We're kind of working right now. I finished a children's book I wrote, and so my girlfriend Brittany is a art teacher, and she's doing working on the illustrations for it. So we're actually hoping to send that to a publisher at some point.
That's really cool. What's the inspiration there?
I don't really get inspiration when I write. I kind of just sit down and or a lot of times actually, I'll be on a bike ride and I'll get an idea and I'll just kind of let it free flow in my head.
Yeah.
I'll just go down the rabbit hole of whatever the idea is, and then if I can remember it, and if it's good enough, write it down.
Yeah, it's you need to get yourself hooked up with. I always think about doing this, and I still haven't found a good app for it because I'm the same way. Like I'll be out on a nice long walk and I'll have this idea, but I hate getting my phone up to write it down on my phone or something like that because it totally takes you out of the moment. And in your case, if you're on a bike, like there's no chance. But I know there's got to be like a solid voice to text thing out there that could help me like pause and just
Yeah, my
get this
biggest thing is I
idea
just
out
don't
real
want to be
quick.
taken out of the moment. I love a
Right,
deep thought, and I love just kind of letting my thoughts flow. And I can never get back to it if I take myself out.
right.
Which is the problem. So that's why it's kind of like a hope that I remember when I get home, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like waking up in the middle of a dream.
Yeah,
It's like you
exactly.
can't quite go back to that dream. Like, you just lay there and you're like, all right, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna finish this thing, and you never get there. You'll never go back into it. It's like that exact same feeling. I totally know what you mean. Um, okay, so I'm referring back to my kind of list of questions here because we've done just so many awesome rabbit holes. Um, but I think that one of the things that really strikes me about triathlon is I feel like it's a huge mental game. And I kind of got into that a little bit with Laura, but I think everybody's probably got a different approach here. Is there what's the mindset for you in terms of like the reason I think triathlon's unique is because you're at like a a serious pinnacle of pushing yourself to a physical level. Like you've done such challenging things to this point, maybe while you're running or whatever. There's got to be walls that you hit. Like what's your mindset as you're in those really real hard moments?
So I actually recently did a little video project where I mimicked the training of the previous Tour de France winner, which was in a seen him as cycling. It was like 33 hours of cycling in the given week. It was probably a little bit more than that. It was probably like 36. And what that
Whoa.
kind of taught me was doing that is that I don't know. This is kind of a weird mindset. This is actually the same mindset I had in my Ironman was that like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I might not be enjoying it, but just do it was kind of the mindset of like I don't have anything better to do at home. I'm not late for a meeting, so why would I
Right.
quit my bike ride early? Why would I DNF from this race? And that's I don't know. That's kind of the simple mindset of like you know just finish it, whatever however slow or fast you do it, just finish it. Especially with an Ironman. When I went into Ironman, my mindset was like, I know I'm gonna finish. I don't really care if it takes me 17 hours. I know I'm gonna finish it, so I might as well give it my everything to try and be in the lead. And then
Yeah.
if it blow up, I blow up. I ended up did blowing up, but that was just kind of the mindset. And and for me, it just makes it simple. If you're content with finishing slowly, it gives you kind of the freedom to go really fast and try and fight for the lead.
Yeah, so it's some kind of essential zen there, right? It's like I'm okay with the results as they happen, and letting go of that means you actually get to kind of exist in that moment and be able to embrace that pain. Or am I somewhere on track there?
I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
That's put well.
My best at. Yeah, yeah, it's amateur psychology is a big part of this podcast. Just me guessing at stuff. Um which of course is for anybody who runs a good long form podcast loves listening to Dak Shepard's podcast Armchair Expert, who I'm realizing this connection also um has dyslexia, I think. And I feel like he's talked about that on the show before. It's like something like dyslexia is there's some study they've done where it's like disproportionately if you're dyslexic there's disproportionate numbers of like CEOs and like top ranking people and there's also disproportionate levels of like criminals who are dyslexic. Like it's almost like you're on a kind of an outlier in society. So it's kind of cool you fall into this level of being a top tier athlete with
Yeah,
dyslexia.
and
Look at
dyslexia
you.
kind of puts you in that situation of like it's either gonna just beat you down your entire life, or you're gonna learn just to keep fighting your way up. So you kind of just like was it literally from the gun? Like I think I was diagnosed in like first grade. Like it's like kind of from the gun. You just gotta figure out how to either conquer it or just let it conquer you. So
Right.
yeah, it's an
Yeah, well
interesting
then
one.
I think that's the theory too, is that either you develop this level of persistence that lets you outwork everybody else, or you don't, or you feel like a failure, which is really unfortunate that
Yeah,
that kind of shoving people into a box like that.
and I actually kind of struggle with being compassionate about it because I've from a very young age I learned like every time there's an obstacle, you never stop. You just figure out how to move around it. So sometimes I can get frustrated in my own life where um if someone I'm talking to they'll have fill in the blank with any reason that they can't do something like I'm stuck in this job I don't like and my head it's just there's no pause there. My head is just okay, go get another job, and then they might say I don't know how to. I'm like, well, figure it out. Like you just figure it out and just do it. You don't sit and wallow. You just go and do the thing. And that's kind of
Right.
what dyslexia has
Yeah.
taught me. I mean, it can be broken as simple as like if I'm reading a book and there's a word I don't know, I don't just put away the book. I figure out what the
Yeah.
word is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's that mindset of sort of that self sufficiency. And it seems like either you're, I mean, some people I think can find that later in life, but it does seem like something that happens early on. It's like, it's a lot to do, I think, with how you're raised and what your circumstances are. I think that's almost a little bit like what I was talking about earlier, sort of that idea of like kids going through hardship. And that's almost what makes interesting and persistent people. Like, I think that can be a level of it as well. Um, I wonder if those things are kind of like linked up in some way that you become more self-sufficient because of those challenges.
Oh, I'm sure
But
there
that's
is. I'm sure it's the same reason why people that are I found at least in my life was that the people that were crazy successful young are utter failures as adults.
because they've already proven themselves, or like what do you think that is?
I think it's just because they weren't challenged enough,
Mm.
which is why I always find it kind of quite the tragedy. I think one of the most successful girls I grew up with when I was really young is probably one of the biggest failures I know as an adult now. And I always chalk it up to like, you almost had it too easy growing up. So then all of a sudden there's something hard, you don't know what to do.
What you don't have to call anybody out here, but what constitutes a failure to you? Because I think I try to develop this really open mind about what it is to be a failure or a success as a person, because I think everybody really defines their own. But what is it that makes you say like that would be a failure in your eyes?
Um, I put a lot of
Like it's
stock. I put a lot of stock, I guess, in life essentials, which I value as like I value college as the first kind of path to. I feel that college is the first real kind of roadway that most people feel in their lives, and I feel like the importance of college is ever more growing. That you either overcome college or you don't. There isn't really a middle ground. So, with this specific scenario, when I say fail, I mean was the one of the top people out of high school, then dropped out of college for freshman year, and then couldn't figure out a life path, couldn't really figure out a job to stay on, and just kind of floated in this abyss,
right.
which is tragic.
Yeah.
And it's tragic to see that happen to someone. And you just think,
But everybody's got like their own. Everybody gets there at a different time though. I'll moderately kind of disagree with you and play devil's advocate here, because we also hear a lot of success stories of people who get to college and drop out and then find sort of that other purpose. And I can totally understand what you mean, sort of if that's the last thing you ever do is drop out of college. Do you know what I mean? Like if
yeah, I totally
that's the
agree with you
last thing
that
you ever.
I don't want to say
Yeah.
that this exact scenario is this
But
is
you're
more
saying this
applicable
is
to
the
this
stepping
situation of this
stone.
person, but in general,
Yeah.
like some of the greatest people in our society today didn't even finish college. It's
Right.
more of just an example of you will have an obstacle appear in your life, no matter when that comes. You're going to have an obstacle, and just you need to be able to figure out how to get through it. You can't let that obstacle stop you from continuing on whatever path you're on.
Right. And college for a lot of people is that first like stepping stone of like as an independent adult,
Yeah,
you
you're out of the
know,
house. You
yeah,
no
right.
one's going to wake you up in the morning. No one's going to make you breakfast. You really need to start being adulty. And
Yeah. Well, and hopefully like you've learned that before that point. I feel like it's so much harder for people who get to college and that's their first experience in having to rely on themselves, like woof, cuz I I can't imagine. By the time I got to college I'd had several jobs. I was able to take care of myself. uh, it's got to be a different experience to show up there and really have only experience as a kid. You're just a kid.
exactly, and
That's
I
got to
think that,
mess with you.
and also I think that as time goes on, people will probably learn to. I mean, college, honestly, if you think about it, hasn't been around that long. I mean, I guess that you just people will learn, and people will make it through, and it'll become more normal. I mean,
Right.
look how normal. Like, imagine if someone, how rare is it for someone not to finish high school? I think a college will soon just kind of become on the same track as that.
Yeah, well, I don't know too at the
Hopefully,
same time, because this quarantine is shaking everything down. Like shaking down college structure's pretty good. And I'm here for it, ultimately. I think that like, you know, I I don't know if college is necessarily the right path for every person, especially not sort of the current model where you pay to
yeah,
go into massive amounts of debt over this thing, and then even the quality of the education or that you receive there seems to be sort of slipping in so many experiences. And now you're paying that level for an online college experience right now. I think
yeah,
it's going to shake people up in a big, big way.
yeah. I couldn't agree
And
more,
hopefully for
especially
the
with the
better.
financial.
Yeah.
I'm a, I guess you could say I'm a pretty textbook socialist, and I really do think it's tragic that we don't have a public college system that's government funded and government paid for, so people can have that experience without having to accumulate lifetime crippling debt. It's just, it's just honestly, it's just unacceptable in society today.
yeah, you certainly shouldn't be able to put your life down on paper as the amount of debt you're going to take on when you're like 17, which is what we see happening. And obviously there's like there's kind of there's multiple pathways through that. Um, but yeah, it's a mess right now, and I do think situations like I've been talking about it on another episode or two, and like my other podcast I talk about it some, that I think that there's these moments in human history where something shakes up uh, something that we thought was solid, and then what comes out the other side is going to be totally different. And the fact that everybody's having to make working from home work, and corporations are having to make it work, and those new technologies are emerging. They were already ready to go, and it's like all they needed was this like empty, quiet ground for things to move in a new direction. Like we almost needed to pause everything, and we're going to see this level of development. So I do wonder what it's going to look like and what college is going to look like when we come back online here,
Yeah, it will be
literally
really interesting.
being able to be in person.
I had this conversation with my mom actually, who works for Lincoln Center, which is in New York City. Lincoln Center is where they put on a lot of the operas and the plays and the ballet. So it's all about bringing people together. Then all of a sudden, this thing happens that's all about people social distancing and not being together. So
Right.
there's a genuine concern of, are people still going to even want to go do that?
Yeah.
You know, hopefully not. People not wanting to go to the ballet or the opera could kill an entire art, which is
Right.
not good for society. I personally don't feel that's good for society long term. So it's just what's going to happen, and I think that's a big question on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that's super cool about art too is that it always adapts to what the it adapts to what people want. I mean, it's an economy in itself, just like anything else. So where's the demand for that art? And so you see that a lot of artists are moving their material online during this time. And again, that's something that maybe there's more of that after this whole thing. And I agree with you. Like, hopefully, live performance isn't dead. I don't want to see that. Like it's great to be able to get together, but that's even one of those things that as far as we know, is going to take even longer to get back up. Like we may be able to open non-essential services soon, but large gatherings of people like that, it could take even longer. So that's one of those things that's really getting shaken up right now. Um, it's a strange moment right here. Um, I feel very fortunate to be able to be someone who already works from home and has built a company doing that. Um, but it's we're still not immune to it, any of us, and it's affecting so many things. Um, my bread's gonna die, like my sourdough starter, man. This is
Yeah,
a big thing for me because I can't get freaking flour.
exactly.
So yeah, so there's a lot going on, and that's the least of anybody's troubles. Don't misunderstand. I know people have real problems right now. My sourdough starter's not one of them, but it's all these things that we thought were real secure, and now we gotta wonder. This is such a dark track, man. Oh, I've been talking about this with every guest, obviously, because it's huge, it's changing everybody's lifestyle. But it is sad right now, and it's still good to keep it in perspective and remember like what we do have. Um, feel it's a good moment to be grateful. People get to be with their families for the most part now. But yeah, things are gonna be looking quite different. And so, kind of relating back to the triathlon world, do is there any idea that anyone has of when events are going to be able to pick back up and start up again, or is it like a long road back to that?
No, and that's a hardship for like us athletes because we always work towards a goal. There's always a race coming up to work towards.
Yeah.
So, like for me, it was literally just like my coach and I, we picked August, and we're like, look, here's all these races in August. We're just gonna train as if these are gonna happen, and then whatever happens happens. And then if August race
Right.
is canceled, we're gonna pick October races and then train towards those. And we're just
Right.
gonna kind of keep doing that because, especially for me, I need to have. It's not that I need a reason to get out and train every day. It's just I need this. I need something to be at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't really matter how long the tunnel is. I just need the light to be at the end of it.
Right. And there isn't one right now.
No, no, there isn't.
Yeah, we still just don't know. We have a long way back, man. Yeah. Well, and I think too about I was talking with Laura about like Olympic competitors right now, and I think about those too, like how momentous it is that the Olympics would get shifted even by 1 year, and what that does to the way people have been training for that, as we were so close coming up on them, and people qualifying and things like that. It's hard to see. It must be hard to deal with in that position. So, man. But let's go to a lighter note now, because I think I want to try to balance this out. How's that sound?
Okay, let's do it.
So I want to talk about, and I always ask my guests this, about kind of where they're at, and kind of typically we're in the same city on this episode, and on a couple more I'm planning. I'm gonna be far away from people. Luckily, I know Boulder really well, so that's great. So tell me some things that you love about Boulder. We talked about the outdoor stuff. What else kind of is there for you? What else is makes you feel happy in that place?
So definitely the people. I really like the I like the outdoor lifestyle. I like the fitness emphasis on living in Boulder. That people do. The amount of outdoor activities in Boulder is literally endless. So I like that part of the
Yeah,
lifestyle. I like kind of the hipster style. I like the coffee shops that we have here. I like those quite a lot. I enjoy the group ridings here. It's all just yeah. It's hard to really break that one down for me because
yeah. Well,
there's so much to it that it's hard to really pinpoint.
yeah, I mean, people is one thing that I lock into with you there. Like moving out to Colorado, it's a really active, healthy, and from there happy population. Like I feel like there's so many people who kind of just get it, and since they're healthy, they've incorporated sort of better philosophies in their lives, and I think that there's some really nice people out in Boulder.
Yeah,
Um,
and the education in
and,
Boulder is really high. The average there was some interesting statistics just about Boulder is just a very educated city. There's a lot of people here with higher education degrees or seeking them.
right,
But a lot of the professional people working in Boulder have very high education. So then also with that comes a very liberal city, which is interesting. Personally, like especially coming from New York City, which is insanely liberal. It was kind of nice to almost have a small town vibe of that, where everyone here is very like minded with this and very just kind of all the things that come with that.
right. And it is also too though kind of a melting pot, which is really cool because you've got, and I you mentioned kind of like the hipster scene. What the hipster scene means to me is that you guys have some good food. Like there's such a plethora of amazing food in that city and in the surrounding cities that you just can't go wrong.
Yes, I look forward to
It's
my
a
parents coming all the time because they take me out to the nice restaurants where I get to really
yes.
experience that good food.
Yeah, what are some of your favorite spots around there?
I always have to kind of pinpoint the Oak on Pearl Street
Oh sure,
as
that
a
place is
highlight because it's very good farm to table. So if you go at the right time of year, it is just phenomenal.
it's fancy too. I mean, I went there once and it's like a serious 3-star dining experience. Like
Yeah,
it's major.
that's why I have to only
It's
go once a year with the parents,
oh
describe
yeah.
it.
I had a gift card. That's why I was able to
Oh,
afford it because I couldn't go on an average
but if I
day.
win a couple
And
more
then
races, I can go there every night.
have you ever been out to Georgia Boys Barbecue out in Longmont?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, put
Georgia
that on your
Boys
list. That was
Barbecue in Longmont.
s- I've had barbecue. I've been fortunate enough to travel around a lot and have barbecue in a lot of places, and that is some of the best I've ever had. They actually catered our wedding because we love their
Well,
barbecue so much.
that's quite the
Um,
testimonial.
yeah, well, it's kind of it's a bit of a long story too because they did show up and lock themselves out of their own car, uh, so we had to we waited around like an extra hour for our actual wedding dinner, which was totally interesting, and we ended up having to bust their window to get our food, which
Nice.
is fun. But that was a fluke, and otherwise, man, that food is great, and it's a good location too. You should go try it out sometime.
That's also one of those things
Just up in
that's
Longmont.
one of the reasons I want to move to Italy so badly is that the food everywhere in Italy is phenomenal.
Yeah, I can
Everywhere.
imagine. I mean, it's certainly like as I look at like, okay, where in Europe would I want to go? You can't. I don't feel like for me you can beat Italian food.
No, 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 no. You definitely
Just
cannot.
amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I did a 2 week stint in Austria, and I in a very small town and lived in this older Austrian lady's spare room, and everything was it was always the same. Every breakfast was the exact same of hard boiled egg, cold meat, toast, black coffee. And by the end of it, I was like, my hand was like shaking as I was bringing the same breakfast to my face for like just 14 days going. I just couldn't handle it.
Right. Yeah. Man.
Yeah. So
But
people
not
from
in
Austria,
Italy.
if you're listening, you got to up the go. You just got to get better food, please. I love
Yeah,
your
well,
country
there's a
so
lot of
much.
places where I feel like it's just the food's just kind of old, and it's like supposed to be the food there
Yeah,
that
but
everybody
not
loves
true.
because it's the food there. Yeah, it's just sort of like the I don't know, it wins first place just because it's been there the longest, but
Exactly.
maybe you got to try some new things. Yeah, good stuff. Well, any other message to leave with the people before we kind of wrap this thing up? My main message right now is just hang in there, everybody.
Yes,
You're
please
doing great.
just
Hope we're
hang
giving you
in
some
there.
entertainment.
I mean, like,
Yeah,
it just that's I don't know. I guess my ending message to people would just be like, look, get out. I know it's hard right now. Go for a walk. Try and live your life the best you can. This is going to be over. I promise you, from all the history books I've read, this crisis will end. The world will continue to spin onwards. So just please live your life as if it is going to continue to spin onwards. Everyone
yeah.
out there is, a beautiful, amazing person. And please, if you have a roadblock in your life, find a way over it. Ask for help. Reach out. You can get over it.
I love it, man. That's a good message for people right now. Just keep it on the bright. So, um, let's give the people. So where can people find you online? You want to give us your Insta or anything
Let's
else?
just focus YouTube. I would love it if more people could subscribe to my channel. Uh, I'm really trying to grow it. I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. If you honestly type in Christopher Schroeder triathlete into YouTube, you're gonna come up with my channel. You know, I really try to make this channel for people. I really try to make the videos that you want to watch. So subscribe, engage with me. Comment what you want to see, and I'll do it for you. I promise. Just please engage with me on there, and that's all I can ask from you.
Nice, perfect. So check them out on YouTube. I'll put your YouTube link in the episode description when I put this out, so people can find that. And I'll also put your Instagram handle there, which is C Schroeder 1994. And I've got to get creative with the pictures. I've got some ideas lately because typically, I just take a picture with the guest, which is my favorite thing. But I think I might start doing like a little collage picture. Like maybe I don't have a bike is the only thing. I was gonna try to maybe I'll get on a bike and then put that next to a picture of you on a bike just to kind of put those together, but I don't have a bike I can access, so I'll think about it. But you can always, everybody, find me and the other episodes on Instagram at thicksonlife, and again, I'm using Twitter to work out meeting some more people, which has been very cool. So find me there as well at thicksonlife, as always. And right now, everybody, just take care of yourselves. Keep hanging in there. You're doing great. Thank you so much to my guest Chris for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. And for everybody out there, we will see you on the next episode.